Hi, I'm James Williams and welcome back to my channel. So in this video, we're going to use Power Automate to automatically change the regional settings for a set of SharePoint sites. So the settings we're going to look at here are the time zone, the locale, the sort order, and the time format. And these are four settings that whenever you create a site in SharePoint are set by default to be these ones here. So UTC-8, which is the US time zone here, Pacific time. The locale will be set to English United States, the sort order to general, and the time format to 12-hour. So if you don't want any of these settings, let's say you're like me in the UK and you want to change a set of SharePoint sites regional settings to be UK time and UK locale, then you can do that using Power Automate and do that in bulk. So we'll do that in this video today. So if you're interested in that, please stick around. So before we look at the flow itself, let's quickly consider how we're going to achieve this. So the way to set regional settings programmatically, which we can do in Power Automate, is to use actions in a site script, which can then apply to the site using a site design. So there's an action called configure regional settings, which I'm looking at here in the JSON schema reference for site script actions. And the regional settings that you can set here using a bit of JSON are those ones we looked at a second ago. So the time zone, locale, sort order, and hour format. And if you're not sure which one you want to apply, there are pages underneath each of these which will show you all the possible values. So if I go into locale values, for example, all of those are in here. So I can see there's various English options. So the default is this 1033 United States. And I want to change it in my example to United Kingdom, which is 2057. And the same goes for the other settings in these sites. You pick which one you want, and then we're going to build this action into a larger site script. So this is how you create a site script. We're going to use the REST API, the Create Site Script REST API today to achieve this in Power Automate. So the way we do that is we pass this endpoint the definition of our site script, which looks like this. This bit here. Well, let's not include the top bit, but just that object. So that's the definition of the site script we're going to build, except that in our case, the action is not going to be applying a theme. The action we're going to use is that one from the previous page, the set regional settings action. So we'll have a script of one action, which will apply the regional settings that we want. And then we have to incorporate that site script into a site design, because it's the site design that we can actually apply to a given SharePoint site. There's one complication here when it comes to using this create site design API to build the site design. As you can see, we pass in the site script IDs in this definition of the site design. So we'll be using the ID of the site script we create using the REST API we've just looked at. But we also need to pass in a web template. Now the web template ID here, 64 in this example, you can see that 64 here is the template used when you create a team site in SharePoint. And 68 is another example where you've used a communication site. So these are where when you create a site in SharePoint, you've got various options for what template you want to use. So there's those two we just saw, team site and communication site. But you might have used many others. So if I go to browse more site here, this team site is not the same as the one on the previous page. This is one that does not create, as it says here, a Microsoft 365 group. So if you just want a plain SharePoint site with no group attached to it, then this is the one you create. And that's got a different template, and then there's obviously a lot of others here, tens if not hundreds of different IDs. The common ones are these four here. So the team type template, the team site with group creation disabled, that's the one we just looked at, communication site template, and a channel site template. Although beware with channel sites that this action apparently is automatically blocked. So this approach wouldn't work for those channel sites. So to test this out, I've got two sites set up already with two different templates. One's just a normal site, so I've just called this test region site. So there's the default values current on that. And I've done one which is a team site. the modern team site. So that's also got the default values. You can see these two here in the SharePoint Admin Center. If I scroll slightly to the right, we can see that one's a team site with no Microsoft 365 group, and one's a normal team site. So these will have different web templates. So we need a way in our flow to make sure that we've got a site design for each web template that we want to run the flow for before we then go through and apply those to the sites. So we'll end up with multiple site designs, one per web template, and each of them will run the same site script. And the site script is that one action site script that will run the action set regional settings, and we'll have that filled in with the action properties associated with, in this example, the UK time zone and locale. Right, so let's have a look at the flow. It's a manually triggered flow in this example. There are no input parameters here, so all the information we need to run the specific flow and apply the regional settings to various sites I've put into this parse JSON action so that it's easier to pick these up further down in the flow. So an important thing at the start is I've created a name. I've just called it set region, and this is the name I'm going to use as the title for both my site script. You'll see that when I create this, I need to pass in further down here, I need to pass in a title to name that site script when I create it. And the same thing goes for the site design. I need to pass in a title for that as well. So I've decided just to name these the same things in the flow. They'll be called set region. And this will enable me to check to see if I've got the site script and site design that I need as part of the flow before I attempt to run it for a given site. So we've got that, and then we've got the root site URL. So this is just the root of my SharePoint tenants sites. Obviously sites, apart from the root site, which we're ignoring today, will have a slash sites after that, and then slash, and then the short name for a SharePoint site. So in my two examples, that will be site/test region site and site/test region team site. So I've got those two short names in this array under the name site short name. So this is the array we're going to walk through as part of the flow to apply the site designs to these sites. And then I've got the regional settings action. So this object here is the settings I want to apply in this format for the action for set regional settings. So I've gone for time zone 2. I've gone for locale 2057, which, as we saw before, was UK. Sort order 25, which I think is general, and our format 24. So there are those settings, and then I've run this as a sample payload in the bottom to create the schema. And that will allow me to reference all these parameters further down in the flow with relative ease. So we first need to ensure that we've got a site script and a site design for each possible web template that we'll need for all these sites. So the first thing I'm doing here in the flow is in a do until loop. I'm going to get the list of site scripts. So I do this by going back to the REST API and seeing these are all the possible REST API commands that we can run from Power Automate. So one of those is get site scripts. So if I look in the list for get site scripts, we reach that REST endpoint by using this address all the way up to the end, get site scripts, and it will come back with a list, as it does here, with all the site scripts that exist on our tenant. All we need to put in at the start is our root site URL and then the API address after that. So that's what I've done here. I've used the root site URL for my parse JSON object, my parse JSON action. It's a post method, which I think it probably says in here somewhere. If I have a look around, I think there's an example at the top where it shows you that the way it does it in the example is in JavaScript. So it's building a function that will send off these individual requests. But we can see that the requests are all post requests here. So we're trying to emulate that, but we're doing it in Power Automate. So we just need to put post in here. We put the full URL of the endpoint in here all the way up to get site scripts. And we send that off. There's no other parameters needed. That will come back with a list of site scripts. So we need to check that there is a result in there that is called set region, which we've named our chosen site script in the parse.json action at the top. So we're doing that by filtering the results. Having run this already, I've determined what the path within the returned object is to check the values that come back. So the array of site scripts. So that's under D, get site scripts results. And looking through those, each of those items will have a title. So I'm checking if the item title for each of those site scripts returned is equal to the site script design name, which will be set region. So this should filter down those scripts to just one. I only want one on my tenant with this particular name. If ever I wanted to create a site script for a different set of regional settings, I'd have to call it something different. So this condition then follows the filter and checks the length of the filter site scripts actions output. So that should be 1 if we've found the set region script. If we haven't, it should be 0. So if the length of that, if I open up this expression, if the length of that body from the returned filter action is equal to 0, so no site scripts were found, then we're going to create that site script. And the create site script follows this approach. We're using the root site URL again, the post method, and then the API for the create site script. So you can see it's very similar to the previous one we looked at, except in this case, we put the title, as is done in this example here, we put the title of the script in the URL by following this exact format. So title equals @title, and then we've defined what that title is, and that's our site script design name from the parse.json. I did have some trouble initially getting this to work, and I found after a bit of searching that we have to use a certain set of headers. So I've done that here. So if you copy these headers out exactly, then this action should work. And the body here is exactly the same as the example from the definition. So we've put a schema in, we've put the action and so on. I think actually I've expanded on that schema as well. And I think that was on that post I found trying to get this to work. So copy out the headers and this particular schema, and then we put our action in. So here, this is a list of actions, or at least it's expecting an array of actions. We only want to run the one set regional settings action, and that is the body from our parameter from our parse.json body, which is called regional settings action. So if I scroll you up and remind you what that was this bit. So it's going to put this object in that array. So one action to run, and that will be passed into the request to build the site script. And then there's version 1 at the bottom there. So once that runs, that will create a site script with the expected name. And then because we're in a do until loop, this should run again, because I've set the do until condition to be that the length of that filter that's looking for the site scripts is equal to 1. So the first time that won't be correct, because there will only be 0 at this point where it's filtering the site scripts. But then we create it after that event. So then this will cause the loop to run again. So it will start back at the beginning and get the site script again. But this time that should include our new site script. And then when it's filtered in this action, it will then be found, and this should have a length as a result of 1. So the flow can then continue. So I've set this to count to 2. So if it goes through twice and it's still not managed to create the site script, then there's a problem in this action. So we'll need to look at that. So it won't just go in an infinite loop, unable to create the site script here. So that's part 1. The next part is we're looping through each site. And for each of these sites, we're using a graph API call, just using the SharePoint HTTP action, as I probably should have mentioned that one is 2. So this is one of the SharePoint backed graph APIs. So if we put this bit at the start, we can then use graph APIs like sites. I've put my tenant name in here, I've put sites, and then I've got the current item, which is coming out of this each site. This is an apply to each loop. which goes through those site short names list. So in this example, I had 2. So this will go through each of these strings: test region site and test region team site. For each of those, it's going to get the site details from this API endpoint. And one of the things that's returned in that output is the template ID applied to the site currently. So we're going to take that, which is an integer, and we're going to turn it into a string, because that's what we need to compare against for the site designs. So that's going to capture an array. Actually, no, this is a compose action, so it's going to capture the single template ID returned from this get site details action. So for every site, it's going to get the details, and it's going to record the ID of the template used to create that site, which, if you remember, is one of these, or the bigger list available elsewhere. And it's going to put that in this compose action. So that might seem a little strange if you've not seen this technique before, because nothing else is happening in this loop apart from putting the ID into a compose. But we can actually reference this compose outside of the loop, and in doing that, we get an array of all the individual values that went into it. So we'll look at that in the results. But we can refer to this compose actions outputs further down, and we'll get each of the individual template IDs we need to see. So that should be a collection then of all the IDs we need to make sure there is a site design for, because remember, in the site design definitions, there's only one web template that site design can be used against. So we'll need one for each of our different templates used across the list of sites we've run through the flow. So this next do until, very similar to making sure there is a site script as we did above before continuing. This is going to make sure that there are site designs for each of those templates before continuing. So the first action here is get site designs. Same as before, we've got the root site URL and the post method, and this time we've got the get site designs endpoint. We'll do a similar thing where we take the results of that, which are in this format, the get site designs / results this time, and again we're going to look at the title and see where that title is equal to our site script design name set region. So very, very similar to the part above. So this is a whole object of site designs, but what we want to see, so if we use that as the input to a select action here, we want to map that to just the web template property. So then this action should output an array of web template IDs. So these are the ones we have available at the moment on our tenant to run. So if these don't include one of the template IDs that we found above here that will be in this action's outputs, then we need to create them. So we need to identify which one of those are missing. So that's what this filter action is now doing. So this is taking the outputs from the template IDs action above, which is this one. And that will return, as I said, an array of IDs that we need. And we're going to filter that for where the output of the available design IDs action, this was that select action, does not contain the current item. So that tells us if it's not available, we need to create it. So this output will be a list of all the templates that are missing, and therefore the site designs we need to create. So we're going to do that in this apply to each loop, where we're taking the union of that missing design IDs output twice. So by putting this twice into the union expression here, we're going to narrow it down to a unique list of missing design IDs, rather than potentially multiple IDs being the same if we've got more sites than one with an ID that's not yet available as a site design. So within that, we've got the create site design step next, using the HTTP connector action again. So we've got, same as before, root site URL and post method. This is the API endpoint, as we can see from the definition here, or the example here. So site script utility create site design. We need to pass it this object, which I've done here. I've used different headers this time to get this one to work. So do use these if you're having difficulties. But this is that object that needs to be passed in. So it needs a title. Well, first it needs an outside layer object here with one property called info. And then within that, we've got all the details for the particular site design. So the first is title. That's the site script design name from the parse JSON action. I've just put a generic description in here. Site script IDs. So this is the list of the IDs from above. So you can see in here, we've kind of built an object with results in it, and we've got an array within that. And within that array, we've got a single string. And inside these quotes where the string is defined, we've just taken this expression. So we're getting the body of the filter site scripts, which is the output of the action way back where we've ensured we've got the script in existence. So this will be an array of 1. Because it's an array of 1, we can safely just use the first, where was I down here? First will return the one and only item in that array. From that, we just want the ID. We need to know the ID of that site script. So that will put it in this format. And then we need to know the web template. So that's the current item in the list. So we're going through each missing web template ID. So that's going to go in here. And then I've just used some dummy entries here to finish off the object. So one thing that was slightly different I had to do in Power Automate was, you see there's no kind of result property here. But when I first tried to run it like this, I got an error in Power Automate saying something like a request like this needs a results property. So I had to build it like this. So that's now, in theory, going to create the site design. And again, we've got to do until, making sure that the length of the missing designs filter here is 0. So once it's run, once it's created all the site designs we need, it will start the process again, get the site designs and filter them down. And we should find that this time there are no missing design IDs because we've created them all. So at that point, we continue with the rest of the flow. So having done all that preparation to make sure we've got all the site designs available that we need, we can then do the slightly easier bit and run through each of the sites. So again, we're using that output from the parse JSON action at the top with the array of site names. And we're going to, for each of those, get the site details again. Slightly inefficient here because we're running through and getting the site details twice. But if you were doing this en masse, you could make sure you've created all the site details, the site designs already, and just have this part as the flow going forward. But this is just to ensure everything is there before it runs in this example. So once again, we're getting the site details. That will give us back the web template IDs. So we're then filtering the output of site design, the filter site designs action. So that was this. So once this is successfully finding all the site designs, this filter site designs action will be a list of an array of all the site designs available to us, where the title is set region. So they're the set region site designs. So there'll be one for each template we need. So here we're just going to filter that down to the single, to filter it down further, because we've already filtered it by the title being set region. We're going to filter it down further to where the web template is equal to the web template for the site we're looking at. So that's the output of the get site details to action and the template ID property. So that comes out of there. We've filtered down, so that again should be just a single item array which has the site design we want to apply to this site. Now this step and the final one aren't necessary to update the regional settings, but this is just how you can see in the flow itself that this has actually changed. So again, I'm using a SharePoint HTTP request, and it's a graph. It's a SharePoint back graph call using the sites endpoint. I'm taking the ID that was obtained for the site from the get site details action. So that will bring me back the details for a particular site, and I'm going to get the settings property within that. So one of the settings that will be shown in that output will be the regional settings like the locale, and we can see that that will be different here in theory to after applying the site design. So we've got one before and one after, and these are identical, but they should have different results because in the middle we've taken this action, which is the apply site design API endpoint, run again in the SharePoint HTTP request action, where we've got the root site URL, the post method, the apply site design API. We haven't looked at the definition for that yet, so if we do that now, I'll just copy this out to the clipboard. I'll find it on this page. So here's apply site design. You can see that there's the URL, and then we need to pass in a site design ID and the URL of the website we want to apply it to. So a very simple setup here. So we've got the URL there. Again, I've used these headers, and this time this is the body. So we've got site design ID, which is the first output. Again, that's going to be just a filter array of one item in this action here, which will contain the site design with the template ID we need. So we're getting the first and only result from that filter array, and we're getting the ID property. So that's the ID of the site design we want to run. And then the web URL for the site will be our root site URL /sites/ and then the current item in the each site to loop, which will be from that array of site short names. And that's it. So after that runs, the design will be applied to the site, and we should be able to examine the change in this action as well as on the regional settings pages. So let's give it a go. I'll just prove that these are current by doing a refresh on each. So we're still in the US time zone with the US locale. Let's go to test this flow. I'll do a manual run. I'll click run flow, and then I'll click done, and we should be able to see the results of this flow coming through. So I'll just minimize that for now and go back to the top. So here's our details of our request, and then we've got the first part, which is creating the site script. So in the first run, it's not found the script, as you can see from here. It's gone down the missing site script route, and then it's created that site script. And then because of that, there's a second run of the loop where it's rerun the get site scripts. And this time we should have, if I click on that, the filtered version, the filter site scripts does contain one site script. We can see here that there's an ID which we'll be interested in later on. But that's got our set region title, and that should contain all the actions that we sent in the first run of the loop. That's the first do until. We've created the missing site script, and then we've gone ahead and got the template IDs for all the sites. So the first site, which was a non-connected team site, that's 1, and the second site we've got. Sorry, I didn't click that. There we go. Is 64. So that's the 2 template IDs we need to make sure we've got a site design for. So get site designs is the next step. So we need to make sure we've got all the site designs that we need. So in the first run of the flow, in the first run of this loop, this do until loop, we should have in the missing design IDs both of those. And that's because there was nothing in the return from the get site designs action. And therefore all of the ones from the output of the template IDs action were missing. So that's all of those here. So you can see that by referencing this, we picked up an array rather than just a single instance of the compose action, which is a useful trick to know. So the first run of the loop, of the do until loop here, we've created that new site design. And then in the second instance of this loop, we can see that there are no missing ones the second time, and that's because we've successfully created it and it's been picked up in the second part of this get site designs action. So having created all the site designs, it then moved on to applying them to the 2 sites. So we've got the site details, We can see in the outputs for that that we've got the template ID, so template ID 1, and it'll be the other value for the other run of this loop. When we've filtered that down, we can see that in our filter array here, if I scroll right down, we've got the web template 1 version of the site design. So we know that was available because we created it above. But this is the site design ID we'll need to run against the site. And that's what we do in this apply site design step. And you can see that it runs. But let's check those before and after settings. So if I click before, we can see here, if I look at the outputs, that the locale ID is 1033, for example. So that's the US default locale, and the time zone here was UTC-8, Pacific time US. But afterwards, if I click on this action, we'll see that we've now got locale ID of 2057, which is UK, and the time zone is UK is London's in it there. So that's worked. And if I go back to, well, before I go off this flow, let me zoom out again, and we'll just double check that it's worked for the second site. So site settings before, show outputs. Again, we've gone from 1033 to 2057. So that appears to have worked here. Let's double check it in the web interface. So if I refresh this page, that's changed to London, that's changed to UK. The same for the connected team site, changed to London and changed to UK. So that's worked. So one thing we can also do is run it again. So if we run it again now, I don't know why I've zoomed in so much, probably all that clicking to try and get the parameters to show. If I test it again, we should find that there's only one run of each do until loop, because it should find those site scripts and site design straight away. You can see this time, if I zoom back in, there's only one run of the do until loop because no creation of a site script was necessary. The same in the part where we check for the site designs, there's only one run of this do until loop because there were no missing design IDs at all in this run. And then it's gone and applied, but obviously in this case there will be no effective change because the locale ID was already what we wanted to see. So that's it. We've successfully automatically applied some regional settings to a set of SharePoint sites using Power Automate. So you could use this where in future you've got more sites that need updating. But one thing also worth noting is that in creating your site design, one of the options which I didn't use here, which is optional, is the isDefault parameter for the site design. So what this will do is apply this site design immediately when any site is created with the particular web template. So if you created one of these for each of the site templates you might use, so the team site, the communication site, the non-connected team site, etc., and you had the isDefault true property in all of those when you created the site designs, then going forward you wouldn't need to run the flow again, because if you wanted this to apply to every site as it was created, that site design would be immediately run on creation, and the regional settings would be updated straight away. So that's useful to know too. So that's it. I really hoped you enjoyed this video. If you did, please drop a like and consider subscribing to the channel. And all that leaves for me to say is thank you so much for watching, and see you later, Automator.